After Hours Museum, elevator key, promise on the glass roof. The museum after midnight keeps its breath the way a secret does, measured, deliberate, rehearsed. The security lights flatten even the brazen things into obedience, glass cases reflecting their own patience. I came in through the donor entrance with my phone face down in my palm like a coin I wasn't ready to spend and tucked it into my left pocket, the pocket I use for things that are supposed to make it home. 2 hours earlier, the hallways were full of polite laughter and ice chiming against ambition. Now a single guard at the far end of the gallery watched a documentary on his phone with the sound off, the subtitles walking a sentence behind as if the night were editing. Back home, Drew had said, "Can we please talk tomorrow?" in the voice that means please stay now. Our couch knows how to turn confession into theater. I left before the scene could find its marks. Halfway down the stairs, my screen lit with a message from in my contacts, M in the way I label hazards to make them smaller. Rooftop bar, just talk. The words behaved themselves on the screen, but I could feel their heat through my pocket. Roofs, I've learned, are great at forgiveness. Nobody has to live within the daylight. I had a name badge from the fundraiser still clipped to my jacket. The lanyard ticked against my chest like a nervous second hand. I slipped the badge off and let it hang from my fingers while I stood in front of a painting I pretended to love when there are waiters listening. An evening shoreline, a small boat, a sky that couldn't decide whether to forgive the water. The labels said oil on canvas as if that solved anything. "Your boat's not moving," someone said behind me, voice tuned for the narrow acoustics between marble and glass. You'd think a decent wind would understand momentum. Mark always found me by sound rather than sight, as if my breath had a password he'd been given early. He was still in his tux without the jacket, the bow tie mislaid, and the top button loosened with the kind of calculation that passes for carelessness. He leaned one shoulder against the wall as if he'd been born doing it. A subtle scratch on his wrist caught the light, a tiny confession under expensive cologne. "You booked a room," I said, "because some sentences need to be handed back like hot plates." "Two, actually," he said, the corners of his mouth undecided. "One with a view of the river, one with a view of our better selves." He held up a key card sleeve between two fingers as if the thing might bite. The numbers read 1203 in the hotel's polite font. He didn't offer it. He let it breathe beside us. "You are a man who collects entrances," I said. "And exits," he said. "Tonight I thought we might experiment with staying." He looked at my left pocket like a man reading a weather chart. "Does he know you're here?" "He knows the apartment's quiet," I said, which is one of the ways we lie when we want to sound disciplined. We stood under the painting, two men pretending the sea had anything to say about the room key between us. Mark's shoulder brushed my sleeve with the politeness of an accident that had been rehearsed. He smelled like cedar and the part of rain that never hits the ground. The guard coughed softly at the far end and then forgot he had done it. "Elevator?" Mark asked, as if the word were a door he'd been holding since the evening started. "Just talk," I said, and hated how easily the lie fit. The elevator near the donor wall was the kind that adds gravity to your reflection. Once the doors closed, the smallness of the box tuned us both to the same frequency. Mark's fingers hovered at my shoulder for something that wasn't a touch, and then decided they were allowed, the barest adjustment to my lapel that made my skin go electric in the harmless places. The carriage climbed through floors that had emptied their ambitions and turned off the music. We watched the numbers bloom and agreed with them. The rooftop bar had gone home. The gardener's glass pavilion above the sculpture court was ours. Beyond the glass, the city had arranged itself with a logic I never question at night. Mark dropped the key sleeve on the small table by the skylight like a coin in a confession jar, and unbuttoned another button he had no right to improve. The line of his throat glowed a restatement of every mistake I have ever considered well made. "You left early," he said, not moving closer yet, warmth arriving before he did. "I kept seeing you in mirrors after you were gone." "Solitary illusions," I said. "Museums are good at those." He reached up and slid the lanyard from my hand with 2 fingers, turning it once before setting it beside the key. Our hands almost touched. Our hands were very educational. He'd had a plan that grammar didn't. Mark's thumb grazed the inside of my wrist the way a match flirts with the idea of fire, not lighting anything, reminding me that potential is a kind of arrogance. "3 words," he said, not caressing the syllables because he knows I'll punish him for that. "Why are you here?" "3 words is cruel," I said. His fingers were back to themselves by the time the sentence finished. "That's why they work," he said. He took a folded cocktail napkin from his pocket, the kind that sits under a good mistake, and set it next to the key. He handed me a pen, the black ink hotel standard, and waited as if the elevator were still moving. I wrote "proud at breakfast." Beneath it, smaller like a fuse I was trying not to touch, I wrote "touch before arguing." The ink behaved. The napkin did not blush, but something in my shoulders did. "Proud at breakfast," he repeated, not mocking me because he never mocks at the edges that matter. "We could try for that." "You booked a room," I said again because repetition is the least erotic hill I know how to die on. "You think I did it for the sheets," he said, smiling in a way that did not use his mouth. "I did it because doors help men make decisions." He stepped in. Heat recalibrated. His breath arrived a moment before he did, and then his forehead was against mine with the kind of caution that pretends to be courtesy. Every nerve in my jaw remembered the prologue to a kiss. I did not give him one. He let his mouth hover a fraction from the place that would change everything and let the air do the work for him. The shape of a kiss, the ghost of one, a question written in the steam along the inside of my lip without the offensive ink. "I shouldn't," I said, not because it would help but because saying it is an old habit I keep in my pocket along with my better self. "Of course you shouldn't," he said, and tilted his head a degree that implies expertise. His fingers found the back of my neck where calculators fear to tread, warm and light and not yet. The pain of it was small and beautiful. We didn't kiss. The glass above us took down notes as if it had been waiting all evening to be relevant. He touched my lower lip with his index finger slowly, like the first accident anyone ever made on purpose. The kind of touch that makes the body a courtroom and declares both sides persuasive. His fingertips smelled like citrus and brand new applause. The city pretended not to watch. "I'm trying to want what I promised," I said, which is my least successful sentence and my most honest. "That's why I booked the room," he said, not moving his hand yet. "So the promise had a door to knock on, and we could answer or not on purpose." He let my mouth go and stepped back the smallest moral distance it is possible for a man to step. "I cheated already," I said, staring at the key because it had the decency to be inanimate. "When we started telling each other the truth before we told it at home." He rolled that in his mouth like good whiskey he wasn't sure he'd earned. "You think I don't know?" he asked. "You think I haven't been the elevator for worse men with a better vocabulary? I am trying to fail differently." He sat on the glass bench with his knees apart and his hands open, the most patient invitation a body knows how to make. The line from his throat to his collarbone looked like a road that never learned to stop. I moved closer anyway, because my body is a bad translator, and rested my fingers at his jaw without urgency. Skin answered like a man relieved to finally be in the correct language. We breathed against each other's cheeks, lips millimeters away from a decision, and let the kiss not happen until the not happening had an architecture. Room 1203 will be empty in 20 minutes, he said, as if delivering a weather report to a man who had forgotten the word umbrella. I'm going home, I said, the sentence calm and accurate and unspectacular. Of course you are, he said, which is why you came up here first. We stood near enough to fuse and did not. He picked up the key and slipped it into his pocket as if it were a lesson he meant to keep. I took the napkin and folded it twice and put it in my left pocket with the phone and the building key that still believes in me. Mark touched my shoulder with the kindness of a man who knows exactly what he is not getting and will keep wanting it anyway. Heat remembered itself obediently. The elevator found us less complicated on the way down. Marble swallowed us again. The guard at the far end sneezed and looked annoyed at biology. Mark and I walked down the long gallery without speaking, our steps agreeing on the beat because bodies are lazy when you let them. Near the exit he stopped, and we stood between two statues that had never cared what men did in hallways. Text me a weather report in the morning, he said, as if that were a way to apologize without trying to be forgiven. Tell me whether the kettle beat the reasons this time. It usually does, I said, when we let it. Outside, the night had no opinion of us. A bus huffed by and carried people home to places they would try to want. I walked the few blocks back to our building, practicing sentences that weren't weapons. At our door my hand remembered codes the rest of me had abandoned. The kitchen light made a small square on the floor. The kettle on the stove looked like the only honest decision-making machine I had left. Drew sat on the floor with his back against the fridge, sleeves pushed to his elbows, one ankle across the other, the posture manuals use when they draw people about to fix things. He didn't ask where I'd been. He tilted his head a fraction toward the spot beside him. I took it. Do you want to be asked? He said softly. Please, I said, because I am not brave without prompts. Are you lonely? He asked. Some nights, I said. Not here, not when you ask first, not when the kettle outruns the script. I took his wrist and set his hand on my forearm the way he does to check whether I'm inventing weather. His thumb traced once and decided the truth. I feel useful, he said. I want to be wanted before I'm useful. Tonight's procedure, I said. Touch first, argue second, report later. We leaned until our shoulders remembered they were allowed. The kettle clicked, which is what mercy sounds like when metal decides to help. We poured tea over mint and named it dinner because names are mercies that cost less than regret. I told him about the rooftop without making it a performance, about glass and heat, and the geography of not kissing. I told him I had folded 3 words into paper that could catch fire and did not. He listened the way a man listens when his body has already voted, and the result is exactly what he hoped. When we finished, Drew pulled a lemon-shaped magnet from the side of the fridge and pinned the napkin under it so that Proud at Breakfast faced the room. He took the dry erase marker and wrote beneath it, "Tomorrow, keep the torque." He didn't grin. He looked tired and accurate and beautiful in the way mornings are when they arrive on time. We made a small rule that night. When prosecution tried to wear a bathrobe, one of us would say glass roof, and the other would put the kettle on while the first one put his hands where history could find them. We agreed to 5 words when 5 were enough. We agreed to stop at the shoulder, not the ditch. In the days that followed, the napkin in my pocket learned the shape of my left hand. Paper learns its carriers. On the bus, I drafted messages to no one that began with "I didn't ask" because I thought that counted as kindness, and ended with "May your breakfast go right." I didn't send them. The not sending felt like skill borrowed from brass rails and patient carpets. A week later, when afternoon tried to be a test, I walked past the hotel and bought nothing. I left a bottle of water on the piano with a note, "For whoever is waiting for a sister." The bartender nodded like a bridge that had held before and would hold again. On the way home, I slipped another matchbook into my pocket and wrote "Turn toward your name" across the white square. I did not light anything. That night we ate toast like it had been newly invented. We failed and then failed differently, and then failed in ways that didn't require anyone to stand in a hallway pretending they knew which door would save them. The room did not demand a verdict. The morning figured out its job. And when we said "tomorrow" out loud, it meant only what we let it mean.